Hey y'all, happy Wednesday. Welcome back to the podcast. If you're new, my name is Ariane, and this podcast is all about navigating life in your 20s and working through the beautiful moments and the super fun moments because it can be so fun being an adult, but also working through the not so great moments. And I'm particularly excited about today's episode because I'm starting a new series and it's all about friendship. So, for the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about being a friend and all the things that are involved with that. But today, I wanted to do a little bit of foundational conversation and talk about the power of community and the four bases of friendship. Now, I'm sure most of y'all, if not all of you, know what community is. You have a community, you want a community, but I actually doubt that most of y'all know about the four bases of friendship. So I'm very excited to chat through that today. And I can't remember where I learned this, but when I was hoping to bring my podcast back in 2023, I'd taken notes, but I didn't say where I got this information from. So if I find that information out, I'll be sure to put that in the show notes. But very, very excited to chat about friendships. I think in my, 6 years of being in my 20s, I have learned a lot about friendships. I've observed a lot. But there's still so much that I've yet to experience. So I have some exciting topics and I have some guests lined up. Matter of fact, in a few episodes, one guest is going to be so amazing. So stay tuned for that. But before we get into the meat of the episode, y'all know I like to do a little icebreaker, a little Q&A moment at the beginning. For the first episode, I took some cards from We're Not Really Strangers. Love that game. Unfortunately, I don't have the friendship edition, so I had to do a little bit of digging for some friendship related questions for today. But the first one that I have here is, what's the hardest lesson you've learned about friendship in your 20s? For me, this was hard, but I would assume that the average person would probably know this and has probably experienced this. Friendships really do fade, especially when you are not watering them. And I never really viewed friendships as a plant, but they genuinely are. And when you are not feeding that plant, they fade. And I think for most of us, maybe there are some friendships that you're okay with them fading away because maybe you realize you guys are different, or maybe you had some type of situation where it made more sense for the friendship to fade rather than grow. But I feel like a lot of us also have these friends where it's like, no, I value that friend, I cherish that friend, but I just have not watered that friendship in a while. And if you don't water them after a period of time, they will fade. And I know on like social media, we talk about, oh, I love that low maintenance friend. We don't have to talk often, but when we do talk, it's all good. That used to be my mindset. Like, I loved that type of person. And I still do. I have people in my life that are like that, and I love them so much. But I also realize that all my friendships cannot be low maintenance. And I don't know if I want all my friends to be high maintenance. I'm still trying to figure out what my definition of a high maintenance friend is. But I do think that it's important for me to pour into my friends and for them to pour into me, which I feel like we don't talk about that. And we're going to get into that topic a little bit later. So stay tuned. But yeah, friendships really do fade if you are not pouring into them. Second question, what's one way you intentionally nurture your friendships? So that one is actually oddly related to the first one, but I think two things that I intentionally do is spending time with that person. I think that you can definitely become friends with someone in a group setting, but I think you genuinely get to know a person in a one on one environment. There's no other distractions. It's just the two of y'all. Like, you're not going to sit there and be on your phone when you're out to dinner with a potential friend, right? So I think that's a great way to nurture a friendship. And then also, this is one thing that I've really picked up is like just being curious, asking them about their lives. And if you have that relationship or if that person is that type of person, asking like deep, thought provoking questions. I was recently with a friend and we were doing something and I just started asking her questions, not like in a investigative journalist style, but just like questions that I had on my mind that were really all tied to like, how are you doing? Because you've been through a lot. How are you doing? Let's talk. Let me know if I can be of any support with this. And I really think that has nurtured our friendship. I would also say I don't intentionally do this, but another way that you can intentionally nurture your friendship is talking to them on the phone. I'm not a big talk on the phone person. I've never been this way, but I know a lot of my friends don't live in the same city or state as me. So if I want to talk to them, it has to be on the phone. And sometimes, again, I don't feel like FaceTiming. I don't know why I'm so against it. I'm not against it. Like, friends, listen to this. I am not against it. Sometimes I prefer a scheduled FaceTime, or I also love a good voice note. But I do feel like a good video call just gets you realigned. Like, matter of fact, I was at home a few weeks ago and I was going back and forth with this one friend, and she was like, "Actually, do you just want to hop on a video call?" Old Ariane would have been like, "No," but I was like, "I'm not doing anything. Let me catch up with this friend who I've not talked to on the phone with probably since I told her about my engagement." And we had such a great time. So, I gave more than one way, but those are some ways that I intentionally nurture my friendships. I think those are very important. And I think when I don't do those things, I find that those friendships start to fade or change. Last icebreaker question. What's one way you've grown in how you show up as a friend? I think this is related to what I was saying in that first episode where I was like reintroducing y'all to the podcast and giving you life updates. I was telling you guys about how I am a more vulnerable and authentic person. Again, not to say I was ever not being my true self, but I think like I really embody that whole like onion theory, and it's a lot of layers to me. But I think like now I'm willing to like shed off a few of those layers for people that I genuinely care about and that I feel as though genuinely care about me. So, other than like being more vulnerable and open with my friends, I think also just being a listening ear. Like I said, I love being curious, asking my friends about like how they're doing and the things that they've mentioned, and when they're telling me that, I'm listening. I'm asking questions. I want to know how they feel about this. I want to know how this relates to this other thing that we've talked about. And then I think another way, I'm giving y'all multiple ways, not just one way. But I think also just when that friend needs help, I will be there to help in the best way that I can. I think that's a little hard with friends being spread out. But like when I am able to, I will help. If I have the extra money, I will help. Like, you are my girl. I got you. I can't be there to celebrate in person. Well, let's do this the next time that we see each other. So I think that those are some ways that I have grown in how I show up as a friend. And I think I'm also really trying to be intentional with how I show up as a friend. Again, because we'll talk about reciprocity a little bit later, but I think that is so important when you're making friends and when you're maintaining those friendships. All right, y'all. So, moving into the main content of this episode, like I said, today we're going to talk about the power of community and the four bases of friendships. And when I have certain conversations, I like to start it off with some definitions because I think that gives us a base level to like work and learn from. So I did a little bit of research. It's just Google, but I wanted to share the definition of community. So these two definitions are from the Oxford Dictionary. The first one defines community as a group of people living in the same place or having a particular characteristic in common. Now, I feel like this second definition is more relevant to like the friendship conversation. And this reads, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals. Got it? Makes sense? Great. Let's move on to friendship. According to the Oxford Dictionary as well, friendship is defined as the emotions or conduct of friends, the state of being friends, right? Okay, cool. But what does it mean to be a friend? I didn't put the source for this one, so apologies. I want to say it was dictionary.com. That takes me back to my middle school and high school days. But a friend is someone who you share mutual interests with, can trust, and spend time with. And I put here in my extra notes, like especially one on one. I think you can still have friends that you don't hang out with one on one, but I do feel like there's a level of comfortability that comes with a true friend where you're like, oh, I could hang out with this person one on one because we have this great relationship. So I hope those definitions were helpful. And just as we're talking about community, friendship, and friends, you have like a baseline to work with. But let's really dig into community. Y'all, community is so, so, so important. And it's definitely important at all life stages. Like, I hope that I have community in every single phase of my life. But I think it's particularly important when you're in your 20s moving forward, right? And I think it's because pretty much from kindergarten through 12th grade, I guess they call that like primary and secondary school, you pretty much had your friends built in from school. You had classes with these people for years, assuming that you didn't move around, and you develop a lot of memories with them, whether it's, again, just from your classroom interactions, your lunchtime interactions, maybe extracurricular activities. Like spending time with those people, you're at school, what, 8 hours a day? If you stay either at the same school or the same school district, you are going to be around a lot of the same people over and over. And then also, just depending on your family, you might have friends outside of school, like from church or extracurricular activities, maybe your neighborhood. All in all of these people are your community. These are the people that come to your birthday parties or graduations and every like happy and sad thing in between, right? But then you graduate from 12th grade. Some of us go off to college, right? And for this podcast, I typically speak from the POV of attending college because that's what I did and that's what I know the most about. But always curious to hear about perspectives for those of you that did not attend college, or maybe you started college and decided to do something different with your career. But just for context, that's where my background is. When you go off to college, like most people don't know a single person at their school, or maybe they know a few because you went to an admission event, or maybe your college recruits a lot of people from your school. Like, for example, when I graduated from high school, I had a few classmates that came to Oakwood with me, which was actually slightly comforting because I knew people. But in general, like when you go off to school, like to college, intentionally building that community is so important. You'll need and want study buddies. You'll want friends to go out with, friends to cook with, friends to sit and do absolutely nothing with, or even you may want some friends to gossip with. You know what I mean? We were all in college at one point. Y'all know what I'm talking about. But I've noticed that in college, for many of us, it was natural to build that community in college. There were lots of opportunities to do so, and there were, I'm not going to say a lot of like minded people, but most people come to college not knowing people and they're open to making friends, especially that freshman year. I feel like freshman year and then like junior/senior year, people are like looking to make friends, looking to grow their relationships. And so, for a lot of people, that community that you built in college, some of those people will grow up into being your bridesmaids and groomsmen, like your aunties and uncles to your future kids, your best friends, and whatever else there is, that's even more than that. And that's so exciting. Like college, I feel like is such a great place to meet people and make friends, right? But then you graduate from college and you have that weird and, honestly, in my opinion, extremely hard experience of building a community outside of that educational environment. Like maybe you moved back home, you stayed in your college town, or maybe you moved to a completely new city or state. Most likely you're back at square one. There are some people who like will intentionally move to where their best friends are. And if I'm being honest with you, I don't think that's a bad idea. Like looking back, I wish I had gathered two or three of my friends and said, listen, let's all try to be in the same place after college. And you know what's funny? I think I talked about this in the first episode. Me and Justin tried that. We're both supposed to be in Chicago. Obviously, he went, I stayed home. We don't have to get into that. But like the idea of moving with your community is so exciting, but also not that realistic because I'm doing something completely different from this friend. That friend's doing something completely different from that friend. Let alone, don't let another friend be going to grad school. Like they can't just choose, oh, yeah, I'm going to be in Chicago. Like you got to follow where you get accepted and where the money's at, right? So for a lot of us, we're starting over completely. Even if you move back home, like when I was back at home in 2020, a lot of my friends weren't there. I think maybe two, but it was also COVID. So like people weren't really hanging out that much. But when I moved in 2021, I was essentially starting over. Like when I moved to Chicago, I had a few people that I became friends with while I was an intern, like while I spent those summers in Chicago. At that time, I didn't know if those friendships were just, 2018 summer friendship, 2019 summer friendship. And so I essentially moved to a new city without a community, which was such an interesting experience. And looking back, I am happy and proud of myself for putting myself out there and meeting new people, eventually making new friends and turning those summer internship friends into real friends. But it was not easy. I don't even know if I really talked about that at the time, but it was a lot. And I would say in my 4 years of making new friends and building this community brick by brick, I have been reminded over and over that community is so important. and that there's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting community and expressing that to others. So, again, back when I was in Chicago, there were points in my journey where I felt lonely. And I'm talking weird because, like, at the time, I was embarrassed, but I feel like even now, I still feel like a level of embarrassment because, like, I remember there was this one point, it was not too long after I moved. Like, I moved in November, so I think this was in spring of 2022. And I was at home, not a single plan in sight. I was bored. I just became extremely sad. Like, I knew I could have called someone on the phone, somebody that didn't live there, or I could have reached out to the people that I knew that lived there, but I just didn't do it. And I probably cried about it. Like, I am an emotional girl. I know it. It's who I am. The tears come out of me very easily. And at that point in my life, I didn't feel like I really had like friends there yet. I'd met up with a few people, I was cool with a few people, but it wasn't to the point where I was like comfortable being like, "Hey, are you doing anything tonight? Let's do something." And like I said, I was very embarrassed of that at the time. I remember calling Justin and crying to him about it. Probably told my mom after, like, "Oh, I feel so lonely." And I think it feels a little embarrassing or awkward to talk about now, but I really shouldn't be embarrassed or anything about that because I know that everyone may not cry about it, right? Your tear ducts might be a little tighter. Everyone experiences that desire for community at some point in their lives. And community is so, so, so important to me. And like that moment really reminded me of that. And even like, I've been in Orlando only for a year, right? Which feels like a long time, but it really isn't. And I'm still working on this process of like building out my community. And for some people, it happens immediately. But for others, like I would say, like myself, it takes a little bit more time. It's funny. I can be a little shy. I can be a little shy. If you know me in real life, you're probably like, girl, you shy? What? No, I can be shy. You can ask my mom. I can be a little timid. It just depends on the environment. In a few episodes, we're going to talk about how to build community, but I don't want to talk about community and not give like a general piece of advice when it comes to this. I would say you got to put yourself out there. And I kind of was just hitting on this. Normally, or to the outside person, I can be very outgoing, I can be very social, but at the same time, and it really depends on the environment, I can be extremely shy and slightly timid in situations that are unfamiliar, new, or uncomfortable for me. Like if I'm in an environment where everyone's already friends, it is extremely hard for me to kind of like break through that ice, have a voice, and make friends with those people. And I know it's not the best. I'm working on it. I'm trying to work on it, but sometimes I'm like, is this a lost cause? But I have noticed that when I put myself out there and I'm intentionally interacting or reaching out to people, I start building a connection with those people. And no, don't get me wrong. It's way easier to not do that and to just go home, but it really is beneficial to stick my hand out and see where it goes. Now, I'm not doing it every time just because I'm still a work in progress, but I have noticed that when I break through that ice and I'm really intentional and I put myself out there, it's really beneficial. And honestly, putting myself out there has allowed me to meet so many amazing people that have become my friends, people that I cherish so much. And also, on the other side, I have put myself out there and a friendship has not developed. Like maybe it was one hangout, maybe it was two. Every single interaction won't be a success story. I'm sure we all know that. Like you're not going to be friends with everyone, you're not going to hit it off with everyone. But I think you putting yourself out there is very beneficial if you're interested in that. And then last thing that I want to touch on for community before we move into the four bases of friendships, I have learned that a lot of people desire community, not everybody. We know that, right? And if you were to actually talk to someone and ask the tough questions, you would learn that a lot more people are unsatisfied with the level or type of community that they have and are looking for something different. And I have learned that both like on social media and in person. I remember, was that 2 years ago? I don't remember when that was, but ended up having a potluck at my house, and there were some people that I already knew, some people that I was already friends with, and then there were some new people that I'd never met before. And I don't remember what we were talking about, but somehow the conversation came up around community. And so many people were talking about how they were really desiring a community. Pretty much everyone was like a transplant, and how they really enjoyed their time connecting with new people, meeting like-minded people. And that whole experience made me feel so warm because I remembered and realized I'm not the only one that feels this way. A, two, or B, it was also awesome to curate that environment for people to meet other like-minded people. I think one thing that I was put on this earth to do is to curate and develop community. I don't know exactly what that looks like right now, but I do feel like it's something that I am capable of doing. And I hate to say I would be good at it, but I do think I would be good at it. So when I am at a phase in my life where I have the mental capacity to curate these experiences for people to meet others and to connect with others or to strengthen their friendships that they already have, I'll be sure to let y'all know. But all in all, community is so important. Do not feel like you're the only one out here that's craving it. Like I said earlier, just recommend that you put yourself out there and talk to others that you suspect or know that are desiring the same thing. Whew, okay, let's stop talking about community. Let's talk about the four bases of friendship. So, like I mentioned earlier, I was listening to something, no idea what it was. I just took notes on it in my phone. And I learned about the four things that really begin and maybe even maintain friendships. So we have proximity, familiarity, similarity, and reciprocity. But first, let's talk about proximity. I feel like this is probably one of the easiest ones to understand. Like, I'm sure we all agree that simply being near someone and being able to like see and spend time with them is a great way or is a common way that many of us have made our friends, and probably the basis of your friendships in primary and secondary school and college, like I mentioned earlier. Like, you see these people every day for hours at a time on a consistent basis, like you're around that person, right? And for me personally in college, especially during the first 2 years, I made a lot of my friends from, like, one, low key my room, which in the sense of, like, me and my roommate, like, Star literally was 3 feet from me. I think our dorm room wasn't tiny, but it wasn't that big. Maybe it was, like, 4 feet, maybe 5 feet, but it wasn't that much space in between our beds, right? We're obviously coming back to the same place every day. We're naturally gonna have conversation. We're naturally spending time together. We're naturally gonna be like, "Hey, let's go get food together," or yada, 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 "Let me introduce you to that person." So, like, that's an example of like how I've made a friend through proximity. Or even like with my suite mates at the time, we used to spend a lot of time with each other, naturally became friends that way. When friends would come down to our room or their room, naturally became friends that way in college. Another way was through classes, like especially my freshman year, I had classes with like not everybody, obviously, but all types of people. It was not just marketing and journalism people. And that's how I made a lot of my friends my freshman year, because it's like, oh, so and so, we have this class together. Let's walk together. Or we both had this hour-long break after this class. Let's go get lunch. Let's go to Chick-fil-A if you have a car, right? So just being near someone, it'll just naturally give you the opportunity to get to know them. And I'm sure we've all been in situations where you've seen this random person over and over, and then one of you finally decides to make the decision to introduce yourself. And it's potentially the beginning of a friendship. Now, I'm not expecting to be friends with my neighbor, but this one neighbor, we would walk past each other all the time. And then one day she just stopped me and we had a conversation, right? And that was the beginning of our neighbor friendship, I guess, right? And I think this proximity point is, again, great and obvious in college and before then. But I think it's challenging for us though, because your proximity to your friends changes and it will continue to change. Like, for example, I don't see my friends from high school anymore. Like, I'm lucky if I see them once every, I don't know, 4 years. I haven't seen a lot of them. Oh my gosh. Some I haven't seen since graduation. Some I haven't seen. I don't even know. It just really depends, right? I occasionally see my friends from college, but we have to be extremely intentional. When you are naturally close to someone, it's easier to build and maintain that relationship. But when there's a little bit more distance, it takes a little bit more work and can potentially negatively affect a friendship if you are not being intentional with ensuring that the space does not affect it. Moving on to familiarity. So again, this is also a given. I feel like all of them are givens, but we all know that being around someone who is familiar, like maybe they're a friend of a friend or somebody that feels familiar, it can be extremely comforting and give someone the motivation to pursue a friendship with that familiar person. Like for example, let's say you moved somewhere where a lot of people from your school tend to move. Like let's say you went to University of Georgia and then you moved to Atlanta. So many people from UGA are going to move to Atlanta, right? It just makes sense. And let's say you're familiar with a few of those faces from your classes or activities or friends of friends. And when you see that person, like let's say I know Tim because he was on Justin's basketball team, right? Because I know of Tim, I've heard stories of Tim, right? It's probably easier for me to go up and have a conversation with Tim versus a stranger because I've seen Tim before and I know that he represents something that's familiar, right? And I feel like this is also very common with HBCU grads. Like, no, we didn't go to the same school, but knowing that somebody went to or graduated from a historically Black college, you just feel familiar to me. I don't know how to explain it. Like, you don't have to go to Oakwood in order to feel familiar from like a collegiate POV. Or like maybe a friend of a friend or a roommate of one of your friends like lives near you. Like, yeah, you don't know them directly, but they feel familiar to you. You have that shared friend. Like I said earlier, you may already know some things about them. So sometimes it feels easier to start that conversation with them versus a totally random person. And again, all of this depends on the person because some people prefer to go with the random person rather than the person that they kind of heard of, you know? The third basis is similarity. And I feel like familiarity and similarity are so similar, but who doesn't like someone that's similar to them? I'm not saying they have to be like a clone copy of you, but there's something about somebody having similar interests or a similar career or a similar childhood or hobbies, whatever it is. There's something about that we just all like. And I feel like this is probably the most common thing that people look for. I think social media also plays a role into this as well. Like, for example, if I see someone eating at a restaurant that I love or doing an activity that I do or an activity that I'm interested in, that might motivate me to reach out to that person and propose that we hang out or even reconnect. Like maybe I knew this person, maybe we haven't talked in a while, but like, hey, I see that you love, I'm making this up, kava. Let's go grab kava next week. Would love to hear what's going on in life, right? Or if you've ever used an app like Bumble BFF, which I have, I feel like I talked about that before, but typically you're looking for someone that has similar characteristics to you or likes to do similar things. Well, let me speak for myself. I like to connect with people that have similar interests, similar backgrounds. And I feel like that also is just like a nice way to, begin a conversation, just talking about what you guys have in common, what's different. Maybe something that's different is something that you're interested in, or maybe you have a hot take on something that's different. And there you go. You already have your conversations ready to go. And then last but not least, the one that's hard for me to pronounce, reciprocity. So this one is an interesting one. And it's basically saying if you are giving the same energy that I think that I am giving, then we will likely become or stay friends. And I agree with this one 1000%. In my opinion, it's so hard to pursue a friendship with someone when they do not reciprocate. And I'm not asking everyone to do the exact same things that I'm doing, but I think in general, we want the energy to match. Okay, let me know if you disagree with me. But I feel like a big example of this is around like initiating hangouts. I don't mind initiating. That's just who I am as a person. I know I can be a very social and energetic person. I have a billion ideas going around my head at all times. And I want to share those experiences with people. So just naturally, I think of hanging out with people probably more than the average person. But, and this is a boundary that I have set, I will not be investing time in a friendship where I'm the only person that does so. And I think I have some some unresolved trauma from this. I don't know, but I found that I can feel unhappy in those situations when I'm the only person reaching out. And I am also fully aware that we are all in different points in our life. We all have different levels of busyness. But I think if somebody is a friend, you are capable of initiating a hangout. Friendships are not even 50-50; they're 100-100. And if you have this great energy, I'm going to do my best to match that energy, right? Like, and it could even be with little things like, let's say we always take turns driving or we always take turns in, I don't even know. But I think just matching the energy of a friend and a potential friend really is a basis of a friendship. And I really, really love that point because I was like, ooh, I feel like people don't think about this. Overall, equity in relationships is important. And notice how I said equity and not equality. So just keep that in mind. But all in all, y'all, we talked about the power of community. I shared my personal experiences with that. We talked about the four bases of friendships and how those can be used to make new friends or strengthen your connections or reconnect some connections that you already have. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, friendships are so important to me. Having a community is so important. And it is something that I intentionally try to build. Like I said, brick by brick, I try to build it, but it's not easy. And shout out to those because there are some people that naturally have a lot of friends, a really good community. That is awesome. Some of us have to work a little bit harder for that. And some of us maybe have bigger communities in certain periods of our life. But honestly, the size of the community does not matter. It's all about how you feel about those that are around you. And like I said, in a few episodes, we'll talk more about community and how to build a community for yourself. But I definitely want to empower you guys. Like this week, if there's someone that's been on your mind that you wanted to hang out with that you haven't, if there's somebody that you've been wanting to hang out with that you haven't, or a friend that you want to reconnect with, I encourage you to reach out. Or if there's somebody new and you're like, I'm going to go up to this girl that I see in the smoothie shop every Wednesday, or go up to this girl in my workout class, just see where it goes. And if you fail, it's okay. Do not blame me. I had nothing to do with it. I'm kidding. But take the learnings from that and try it again. It doesn't have to be this week. It doesn't have to be this month. You can give yourself some time. But like I said earlier, putting yourself out there really can put you in the situation for some exciting and beautiful friendships. Like literally, there are people that come to mind where I'm like, if I would not have reached out to this person, maybe we would have connected, right? But I don't know if we would have been the friends that we are today without, not to say I'm the reason for the friendship. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I just am proud of myself for making that first move because naturally I would not make the first move and just see how things go. And that person may not be in my life if I would have done that. So who knows? Maybe that will happen for you. I appreciate y'all so, so much. Thank you for tuning in to Graduated and Grown this third week. As always, if you enjoyed the episode, please don't forget to subscribe or follow the podcast and then leave us a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Or if you want to be like a real one, you can do both. You don't even have to do like a little like typed review, even though I would love that because I love reading and knowing your thoughts. So either or is totally, totally fine. And don't forget to follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Graduated and Grown, all one word, just for content and updates each week. And if you thought that this episode was helpful and insightful, please share this podcast with a friend, whether it's this specific episode or just the general Graduated and Grown podcast. I would really, really appreciate it. And again, as always, ×2. If you have any topic ideas, let me know in the DMs because I check them. I may not check my personal DMs, but I check the podcast DMs. Anyway, I will see y'all next week. I'm very excited about next week's episode. I'm a little nervous though. It's still about friendships. I don't even want to get into it. We'll talk about it next week. Bye, guys.